A remake of the 2022 Danish film of the same name, Speak No Evil, focuses on an American family who meet a British family whilst on holiday in Italy, and this leads them to be invited to stay at their remote farmhouse for a weekend after their return to England. Tensions start to rise as the guests find themselves presented with uncomfortable situations that start to escalate over time, testing the limits of the guests and suggesting something dark and sinister about this British couple and their mute son. This film starts off pretty much almost beat for beat, line for line, a remake of the Danish film, and it initially does beg the question, what's the point? Especially when the original was not only so recent, but also spoken primarily in the English language. However, small changes to the opening act feel like they built the friendship between the two families a lot better, and the casting of McAvoy in the role of Paddy, the father of the farmhouse-owning family, is a masterstroke. In the part, he manages to switch from outwardly caring and compassionate to fun joker to sinister threat with absolute ease, and right from the first act, his subtle changes in presentation of Paddy serve to unsettle and generate a sense of foreboding in the isolated homestead. As the film plays out, additional alterations to the original film's tale, offering background to the characters to explore the reasons for their actions, lend well, as does the approach to the third act, which keeps a level-headed sense of threat right to the end. Never has a scene of someone climbing a ladder sent so many chills down my spine before. This is probably the best Blumhouse production that there's been in recent years, and it's packed with atmosphere, making it a thrill to watch right to the very final frame, primarily because of how intensely marvellous McAvoy is in that central bit of casting. Set in 1934, the Critic sees Ian McKellen play Jimmy Erskine, a theatre critic of note who writes for the Chronicle. His reviews are always the talk of the town, with a biting vitriol and almost a sense of disdain towards the very art that he writes about. When the owner of the paper passes away and his son, David Brooke, played by Mark Strong, takes the reins, changes in the stance of the paper see Jimmy being told to tone down his style of writing and indeed his lifestyle to better reflect the family values that the Chronicle is aimed at. Jimmy, you see, is a homosexual, and his encounters with the law have proven to be a problem. But when he ends up being asked to leave the paper after one too many disgraces, Jimmy works with young actress Nina, played by Gemma Arterton, on a revenge blackmail scheme against David. This is a pretty uneven film that meanders around far too much before getting to the meat of the tale, the blackmail plot, and then doesn't entirely deliver on the promises that it seems to set out to make. The period setting allows for an interesting exploration into the lifestyle of Erskine at a time when homosexuality was outlawed. We see how Jimmy delves into the dark and dangerously seedy underworld of the night to fulfill his drunken desires. But there never feels like there's any weight to these explorations. And maybe if the film had focused instead on Jimmy's relationship with his secretary Tom, played by Alfred Enoch, it would have had more depth. Ben Barnes is on hand as the son-in-law of Brooke, who's also the lover of the young actress for whom Brooke has a fascination. But again, this feels like an underserved subplot, making the eventual climax of that element feel a little flat. However, McKellen does shine from start to finish, and he largely props up what would otherwise be a very forgettable period piece. He takes pleasure in every spit and bite of malicious dialogue that Jimmy fires out, both in his reviews and his direct exchanges. His drunken pomposity on display, even when simply glance-taking notes at a play. You can hear the venom being churned in his mind, ready to spew out in another review. There's something wonderful to hate about Jimmy, who's certainly not a person that's easy to warm to, but thanks to the layers that McKellen brings, it's also easy to start to root for him as a somewhat underdog lashing out against the system that oppresses him. Simply put, this is a pretty standard period film that uses the period setting well, but never really explores any of the individual ideas it has in any satisfactory way. It's worth seeing purely for a marvellously devilish central performance by McKellen.